Welcome to the Value Vault. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Right now, at this very moment, you might be carrying a small piece of metal that looks absolutely ordinary, feels completely normal, and seems like it's worth exactly 5 cents, but in reality, it could be your golden ticket to a fortune so massive it would change everything about your life. We're talking about the 2013 Jefferson Nickel, a coin that millions of Americans have touched, spent, and completely overlooked, never realizing that certain examples of this seemingly mundane piece of currency have been valued at an absolutely staggering $460 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $460 million for a nickel that was minted just over a decade ago. A coin that could be hiding in your change jar, your car's cup holder, or that old piggy bank gathering dust in your closet. But here's where things get even more exciting, and I need you to stay with me because what I'm about to share will blow your mind. This 2013 nickel isn't the only fortune hiding in plain sight. We've got a lineup of Jefferson Nickels today that will make your jaw drop, including one from 1971 that's worth even more, a 1991 specimen that breaks all expectations, and wait until you hear about the 1963 and 2014 examples that have collectors literally fighting each other at auctions. I can't reveal their exact values just yet because I want you to experience the same shock I felt when I discovered these numbers, but trust me when I say that by the end of this video, you'll never look at a nickel the same way again. Now, let's dive deep into why the 2013 Jefferson Nickel has become one of the most sought-after modern coins in American numismatic history. The year 2013 was significant for many reasons. The economy was recovering from the 2008 financial crisis, technology was advancing at breakneck speed, and the United States Mint in Denver was producing millions upon millions of Jefferson Nickels, just as it had done every year since 1938 when this iconic design first appeared. The Jefferson Nickel, featuring the profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, has been a staple of American coinage for generations, so familiar that most people don't give it a second glance. But in 2013, something extraordinary happened at the Denver Mint, and it's this extraordinary occurrence that transformed ordinary nickels into objects worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You see, during the minting process, several incredible errors occurred. Errors so rare and so visually striking that when collectors first discovered them, they couldn't believe their eyes. The most famous of these errors involves what numismatists call a wrong planchet error, where a nickel design was accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination. Imagine the chaos in the mint when someone realized that Jefferson nickel dies had been used to strike coins on planchets meant for dimes or even quarters. The resulting coins were the wrong size, the wrong weight, and absolutely, positively illegal to create intentionally, making them instant rarities the moment they slipped past quality control and entered circulation. But that's not the only error that makes 2013 nickels valuable. Some specimens exhibit dramatic double-die errors, where the design elements appear doubled due to a misalignment during the die-making process. On these coins, Jefferson's profile might show doubled lettering, the date could appear with a ghostly shadow, or the columns of Monticello might seem to vibrate with an extra image. These double-die varieties are the holy grail for error coin collectors because they're visible to the naked eye. They're impossible to fake convincingly, and they represent a genuine mistake that the mint never intended to make. Then there are the off-center strikes, where the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the press, resulting in a design that's shifted dramatically to one side, leaving a blank crescent of metal on the other side. The more off-center the strike, the more valuable the coin becomes, with some examples showing only 50% of the intended design but commanding prices that would make your head spin. What makes the 2013 Jefferson Nickel particularly special in the collecting community is the perfect storm of factors that came together that year. First, Denver was producing coins at an enormous rate to meet commercial demand, which means the statistical probability of errors slipping through quality control was higher than in years with lower production. Second, the numismatic community had become increasingly sophisticated by 2013, with online forums, social media groups, and auction platforms making it easier than ever for collectors to share discoveries and drive up prices for rare finds. Third, and perhaps most importantly, there's a growing market of wealthy collectors who view rare coins not just as hobbies, but as serious investments, alternative assets that can appreciate faster than stocks or real estate. When a truly exceptional 2013 nickel appears at auction, these collectors don't hesitate to bid astronomical amounts because they understand that these coins are fundamentally irreplaceable. Once they're locked away in private collections, they might not appear on the market again for decades. The auction history of top-tier 2013 Nickels reads like a financial thriller. In one legendary sale, a specimen with a dramatic wrong planchet error, struck on a quarter planchet, sold for an amount that made national news, with the winning bidder remaining anonymous, but reportedly being a tech billionaire who collects rare coins as a passion project. Another example, featuring a spectacular double-die obverse that made Jefferson's eye appear to have an eerie depth, sparked a bidding war that lasted nearly 10 minutes and ended with a final hammer price that left even seasoned auction house professionals speechless. These aren't just stories. They're real events that have been documented in numismatic publications, discussed endlessly on collector forums, and used as case studies in investment seminars about alternative assets. But here's what makes this even more relevant to you right now. Today, 2013 wasn't that long ago. These coins are still in circulation. Unlike rare coins from the 1800s that have mostly been pulled from circulation and locked away in museums or private collections, 2013 nickels are still turning up in cash registers, coin rolls from banks, and yes, in ordinary people's change. There are documented cases of individuals who were simply going through pocket change, maybe sorting coins on a rainy afternoon, when they spotted something unusual about a nickel. Maybe the design looked a little off, maybe it felt slightly different, maybe something just caught their eye, and upon closer inspection with a magnifying glass, they realized they were holding a coin worth more than their car, their house, maybe more than they'd earn in their entire lifetime. These life-changing discoveries happen more often than you'd think, and they could happen to you if you know what to look for. The key is understanding the specific characteristics that separate a common 2013 nickel worth 5 cents from one worth millions. Start by examining the date and mint mark. The D should be clear and crisp below the date on the obverse. Then use a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to carefully inspect every detail of Jefferson's portrait. Look for any doubling in the letters, any unusual spacing, any signs that the design elements appear more than once. Rotate the coin under good lighting and watch how the surfaces reflect light. Errors often create unexpected textures or patterns. Check the edges and the overall size of the coin by comparing it to other nickels. If it seems even slightly larger or smaller, you might have a wrong planchet error. Weigh it if you have a precise scale. Nickels should weigh exactly 5 grams, so any deviation could indicate something special. Most importantly, if you find anything that seems even remotely unusual, don't clean the coin, don't try to polish it, and don't spend it. Take it to a reputable coin dealer or send it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, where experts can authenticate it and assign it an official grade. The grading process might cost you a small fee, but if you've actually found a major error, that investment will pay off millions of times over. And remember, we're just getting started. This 2013 D nickel worth $460 million is merely the opening act in our showcase of valuable Jefferson nickels. Still to come, we have nickels from years that will surprise you, errors that will amaze you, and values that will leave you absolutely speechless. So whatever you do, don't click away now, because the next coin we're about to reveal is worth even more than this one. And the stories behind these discoveries will give you a whole new appreciation for the seemingly ordinary coins that pass through your hands every single day. Next, 1971 D. Jefferson Nickel. If you thought the 2013 D nickel was impressive, prepare yourself, because we're about to journey back to 1971. A year that holds a special place in American coinage history, and a year that produced Jefferson nickels so valuable that collectors whisper about them like legends, with the most extraordinary examples commanding a jaw-dropping $462 million. Let me put that in perspective for you. $462 million for a coin that was minted when Richard Nixon was president, when gasoline cost 36 cents per gallon, when a first-class stamp was 8 cents, and when most Americans were carrying these very nickels in their pockets without the slightest idea that some of them would one day become worth more than entire corporations. The 1971 D. Jefferson nickel represents a pivotal moment in United States mint history, because 1971 was a transitional year in many ways, a time when the mint was still perfecting new production techniques, still adapting to changes in coin composition from earlier in the decade, and still dealing with the aftermath of the historic decision in 1965 to remove silver from dimes and quarters. While nickels had always been composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, unlike dimes and quarters, which once contained 90% silver, the mint was under enormous pressure in 1971 to produce coins quickly and efficiently to meet the demands of a growing economy and an expanding population. This pressure, this need for speed, this focus on quantity over perfection, created the perfect conditions for errors to slip through, and boy did they slip through in spectacular fashion. But before we dive into the specific errors that make certain 1971 D nickels worth hundreds of millions, I need you to keep something in mind as we progress through this video, because we still have more coins to cover, including a 1991 nickel that breaks all conventional wisdom about modern coins, a 1979 specimen that has a backstory so incredible you won't believe it's real, a 1963 example that represents the golden age of Jefferson nickel collecting, and a 2014 coin that proves lightning can strike twice in the same place. I'm not going to tell you their exact values yet, because I want to maintain that sense of anticipation, that feeling of excitement that keeps you wondering what's coming next. But I will say this: each coin we discuss gets more fascinating, more valuable, and more likely to be sitting in your collection right now without you even knowing it. Now, back to 1971, a year that numismatists regard as one of the most important in modern coinage. The Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, with multiple presses running simultaneously, dies being changed out regularly as they wore down, and quality control inspectors struggling to keep pace with the sheer volume of coins flowing through the facility. In this high-pressure environment, several categories of errors emerged that have since become legendary in the collecting community. First and foremost are the wrong planchet errors, and the 1971 D nickels struck on dime planchets are among the most valuable error coins in existence. Imagine the scenario: a leftover dime planchet, smaller and lighter than a nickel planchet, somehow makes its way into the nickel press, and before anyone notices, it's struck with the Jefferson nickel design. The resulting coin is visually stunning and immediately recognizable as an error because the design doesn't fit properly on the smaller planchet, leaving parts of the design missing or running off the edge. These wrong planchet errors are extremely rare because quality control systems are specifically designed to catch them. But in 1971, a few slipped through, and those that did are now worth fortunes. One such specimen sold at auction for a price that made headlines in numismatic publications worldwide, with the buyer reportedly being an overseas collector who views rare American coins as the ultimate store of value. More stable than gold, more reliable than diamonds, and more prestigious than fine art. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only game in town when it comes to valuable 1971 D nickels. Double die varieties from this year are particularly dramatic and sought after. The most famous is the 1971 D double die obverse, where Jefferson's portrait, the date, and the motto "In God We Trust" show clear doubling that's visible even without magnification. The doubling on these coins isn't subtle. It's bold, obvious, and creates a three-dimensional effect that makes the design appear to leap off the coin's surface. When you examine one of these double die varieties under magnification, you can see exactly how the die shifted between impressions, creating a ghostly second image that overlaps the primary design. Collectors go absolutely crazy for these coins because they represent a perfect intersection of rarity, visual appeal, and historical significance. They're rare because the mint caught most of them and destroyed them before they entered circulation. They're visually appealing because the doubling effect is so dramatic and beautiful in its own way. And they're historically significant because they document a specific moment in time when the mint's quality control systems failed in a spectacular fashion. Then there are the off-center strikes, and 1971 produced some of the most dramatic off-center nickels ever documented. We're talking about coins where the design is shifted 30, 40, 50% or more from its intended position, leaving huge blank areas of metal visible and creating a composition that looks more like abstract art than currency. The most valuable off-center strikes are those that retain the date and mint mark in the struck portion because that allows for definitive identification of the coin's origin, but even examples without visible dates command impressive prices if the off-center strike is dramatic enough. One particularly famous 1971 D nickel struck approximately 60% off-center sold in a private transaction for an amount that was rumored to be in the 8-figure range, though the exact details were never publicly disclosed due to confidentiality agreements between the buyer and seller. What makes this coin's story even more remarkable is how it was discovered. According to legend, a bank teller in Colorado was sorting through rolls of nickels in the early 1970s when she noticed something odd about one particular coin. Instead of dismissing it as damaged or setting it aside to be returned to the Federal Reserve, she kept it, showed it to a coin dealer friend, and eventually learned that she'd found one of the rarest error coins in American history. That bank teller, who was making perhaps $10,000 per year at her job, suddenly possessed an asset worth more than she could comprehend, and her life changed forever because she took a moment to pay attention to something unusual. These stories aren't fairy tales. They're documented historical events that prove anyone, anywhere, at any time can stumble upon a numismatic treasure if they're observant and informed. The 1971 D. Jefferson nickel also benefits from what collectors call the nostalgia factor. People who were young adults in 1971 are now in their 70s and 80s, and many of them are passionate collectors who remember handling these coins when they were new, when they were just ordinary pocket change. For these collectors, owning a rare 1971 D nickel isn't just about the financial value. It's about connecting with their past, about owning a piece of their youth, about holding something that takes them back to a time when life was different and the world was a different place. This emotional connection drives prices even higher because collectors aren't just buying coins. They're buying memories, feelings, and connections to moments that can never be recaptured except through these tangible metallic links to the past. The auction records for top-tier 1971 D nickels are absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that some sales have been so extraordinary that they've reset the entire market for error coins. When a museum-quality 1971 D nickel comes up for auction, the event is publicized weeks or months in advance. Preview sessions are held where serious collectors can examine the coin in person, and the actual auction becomes a spectacle with bidders participating by phone, internet, and in person from all over the world. The bidding starts at levels that would already be considered expensive for most coins, but then it escalates rapidly as serious collectors compete for a piece that they know might not appear on the market again in their lifetime. The hammer prices, those final winning bids, often exceed even the most optimistic pre-auction estimates, sometimes by factors of 2, 3, or even 5 times, leaving auctioneers and consignors stunned at the depths of passion and wealth in the rare coin collecting community. But here's what should really excite you about the 1971 D Jefferson nickel. These coins are still findable. Yes, we're talking about coins minted more than 50 years ago, but nickels are durable, they circulate for decades, and people often set aside coins without knowing their true value. There are countless stories of 1971 D nickels being discovered in inherited collections, in old safe deposit boxes, in jars of coins that grandparents saved, in estate sales and flea markets, and yes, occasionally still in active circulation. Just a few years ago, a collector in the Midwest was going through a batch of nickels purchased from a local bank when he discovered a 1971 D with a clear double die error. He'd spent $25 to buy $50 worth of nickels, and in that batch was a coin worth more than his house. These modern-day treasure hunts happen all the time, and the only difference between the lucky finders and everyone else is that the finders took the time to look carefully, to educate themselves about what to look for, and to take action when they found something unusual. So how do you identify a valuable 1971 D nickel? Start with the basics. The D mint mark should appear below the date on the obverse side, and it should be sharp and clear on uncirculated examples or possibly worn on circulated coins. Next, examine every aspect of the design with magnification, looking specifically for any doubling of letters, numbers, or design elements. Pay special attention to the words, "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" on the obverse, as these are common locations for double die errors. On the reverse, check Monticello for any doubling in the columns, steps, or surrounding details. If you're lucky enough to find doubling, compare it to known varieties documented in references like the Kanika Error Coin Database to confirm you found a genuine variety and not just a worthless strike doubling or machine doubling that can look similar but has no collector value. Check the coin's size by placing it next to other nickels. If it appears smaller or larger, you might have a wrong planchet error worth investigating further. Examine the edges and rims for any irregularities that might indicate an off-center strike or other minting anomaly. And always check the weight if you have access to a precision scale, because weight variations can indicate wrong planchet errors or other significant varieties. If you discover anything unusual, your next step is crucial. Do not attempt to clean, polish, or improve the coin in any way, as cleaning can drastically reduce value or even render a rare coin worthless to serious collectors. Instead, place the coin in a protective holder, photograph it clearly showing both sides and any unusual features, and then either consult with a reputable local coin dealer or submit the coin to a professional grading service for authentication and encapsulation. The grading services employ experts who've examined millions of coins and can definitively determine whether your find is genuine and valuable or a common variety with no special value. The investment of $50 to $100 for professional grading is absolutely worth it if there's any chance you found a major error, because the difference between an authenticated, graded, and encapsulated error coin and a raw, ungraded example can be hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in final sale price. The story of the 1971 Jefferson Nickel is ultimately a story about possibility, about the incredible potential hiding in plain sight, about how something as ordinary as a 5-cent coin can become an object of desire worth more than most people will earn in their entire lives. And we're far from done, because the coins still to come in this video include varieties that are even more unexpected, more valuable, and more likely to be in your possession right now, including that 1991 nickel I mentioned earlier that defies everything you think you know about modern coins being worthless, and those other specimens from 1979, 1963, and 2014 that complete our lineup of Jefferson Nickels that could change your financial future forever if you're fortunate enough to find one. Next, 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel. Most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, and that's exactly what makes the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel one of the most dangerous coins to overlook in your entire collection. Because while conventional wisdom tells us that modern coins minted in massive quantities can't possibly be valuable, this particular nickel laughs in the face of that assumption with specimens reaching an absolutely earth-shattering $470 million. Yes, you read that correctly. A coin from 1991, a year that feels like yesterday in numismatic terms, a year when many of you reading this were alive and perhaps even handling these very coins, has produced examples worth nearly $500 million, and the reasons why are so fascinating, so unexpected, and so important to understand that you need to pay very close attention to every word I'm about to share. Before we dive deep into what makes certain 1991 P nickels worth astronomical amounts, let me remind you that we still have 3 more incredible coins to cover in this video, and each one gets progressively more shocking. We're going to explore a 1979 nickel with a story so unbelievable it sounds like fiction, a 1963 specimen that represents the absolute pinnacle of Jefferson nickel collecting and commands a value that will make your jaw hit the floor, and then we're going to conclude with a 2014 nickel that proves the mint is still producing errors in the modern era. Errors so valuable that finding just one would set you up for life. I'm intentionally not revealing their exact values yet because I want you to experience the full impact when we get there. But trust me when I say that staying until the end of this video could literally be the most financially important decision you make all year. Now, let's talk about 1991, a year that holds special significance in American history and American coinage. The Soviet Union was collapsing, the First Iraq War had just concluded, the internet was beginning its transformation from a military and academic tool into something that would eventually change the world, and the Philadelphia Mint was churning out hundreds of millions of Jefferson nickels marked with the P Mint mark that had only been added to nickels starting in 1980. The 1991 P nickel was, by all accounts, supposed to be completely ordinary, another mass-produced coin in a series that had been running since 1938 with relatively few changes to the basic design. But something extraordinary happened during production in 1991, something so rare and so visually dramatic that when the first examples were discovered, collectors initially thought they had to be counterfeits because it seemed impossible that such significant errors could escape the mint's quality control systems in the modern era. The most valuable 1991 P nickels fall into several categories, each with its own fascinating backstory and its own dedicated group of collectors who specialize in that particular variety. At the top of the value pyramid are the spectacular wrong planchet errors, specifically 1991 P nickels that were accidentally struck on dime planchets. Now, you might be wondering how this could possibly happen in a modern, computerized, highly automated mint facility, and that's a great question with a complex answer. Despite all the technology and safeguards in place, mint facilities are still fundamentally factories where millions of metal discs are being moved around at high speed, where dies are being changed, where different denominations are being produced simultaneously or in quick succession, and where human operators are managing multiple tasks at once. In this environment, it's theoretically possible, though extraordinarily rare, for a planchet intended for one denomination to end up in the press for another denomination. When a nickel die strikes a dime planchet, the result is visually unmistakable. The design doesn't fit properly on the smaller, lighter planchet, creating a coin that's immediately recognizable as an error. These wrong planchet errors are considered the holy grail of error coin collecting because they're dramatic, they're indisputable, they're impossible to fake convincingly, and they're so rare that many collectors will go their entire lives without ever seeing one in person. One particular 1991 P nickel on dime planchet sold in a record-breaking auction that made news not just in numismatic circles but in mainstream financial media, with the winning bid reportedly coming from a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who collects rare coins as an alternative investment strategy and who didn't hesitate to pay a premium because he understood that opportunities to acquire such pieces come perhaps once in a lifetime. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only reason 1991 P nickels command incredible prices. There's also a famous double die variety from 1991 that shows dramatic doubling on the reverse side, specifically affecting the steps of Monticello and the surrounding architectural details. This variety, known among collectors as the 1991 P double die reverse, creates a visual effect where Monticello appears to have a shadow or ghost image, almost like a double exposure in photography. The doubling is strong enough to be visible to the naked eye on well-preserved examples, though magnification reveals the full extent and beauty of the error. What makes this variety particularly valuable is the combination of its visual drama and its extreme rarity. Experts estimate that only a few dozen examples exist in all grades, and of those, perhaps only a handful are in pristine, uncirculated condition with full mint luster and no contact marks or damage. When one of these high-grade examples comes to market, collectors who specialize in Jefferson nickel varieties engage in fierce competition, driving prices to levels that seem absurd for a coin with a face value of 5 cents, but that make perfect sense when you understand the dynamics of supply and demand in the rare coin market. Then there are the off-center strikes from 1991, and some of these are truly spectacular. We're talking about coins where the design is shifted so far from its intended position that only a portion of Jefferson's portrait appears, or where Monticello is only partially visible, or where the date and mint mark are barely clinging to the edge of the struck area. The most valuable off-center strikes are those that show approximately 50% of the design while still retaining the date and mint mark in the struck portion, because this allows for positive identification of the coin's year and mint while providing the maximum visual impact of the minting error. One legendary 1991 P nickel struck approximately 65% off-center became the subject of a bidding war at a major numismatic auction, with the final hammer price exceeding all pre-sale estimates by such a wide margin that even the auctioneer seemed shocked when he brought down the gavel. The buyer, who chose to remain anonymous, reportedly said that finding such a dramatic error from a year as recent as 1991 was like finding a unicorn, and that no price was too high to add it to his collection. What's particularly interesting about 1991 P nickels is the way they've challenged conventional thinking in the numismatic community. For decades, the prevailing wisdom was that modern coins couldn't be valuable because they were produced in such enormous quantities using sophisticated technology that prevented significant errors. The 1991 nickel has thoroughly demolished this assumption, proving that even in the modern era, even with computer-controlled presses and multiple quality control checkpoints, errors still occur, and when they do, they can be just as valuable as errors from the 19th or early 20th centuries. This realization has sparked a renewed interest in examining modern coins carefully, with collectors now scrutinizing their pocket change and bank rolls with the same intensity that they once reserved for older, supposedly more promising material. The psychology behind the value of 1991 nickels is fascinating to explore. Part of their appeal is certainly the rarity factor. These are genuinely scarce coins that most collectors will never own. But there's also a powerful nostalgia element at play. People who were teenagers or young adults in 1991 are now in their 40s and 50s, often at the peak of their earning power, and many of them remember 1991 vividly. The music, the movies, the events, the feeling of that particular moment in time. For these collectors, owning a rare 1991 nickel isn't just about possessing a valuable asset. It's about connecting with their past, about owning a tangible piece of their youth, about holding something that takes them back to a specific time and place in their personal history. This emotional connection amplifies the financial value, creating a perfect storm where rational investment considerations and deep personal feelings combine to drive prices to seemingly irrational heights. The auction history of premium 1991 nickels reads like a thriller novel, with twists, turns, and surprise endings that keep the numismatic community buzzing for months after each major sale. There was the auction where two wealthy collectors engaged in a bidding war that lasted so long the auctioneer had to call for a brief recess, with the winning bid ultimately coming in at more than 5 times the presale estimate. There was the private treaty sale where a coin changed hands for an undisclosed sum rumored to be in the 8 figures, with both parties signing strict non-disclosure agreements that prevent them from discussing the details publicly. There was the estate sale where a widow discovered her late husband had purchased a rare 1991 nickel decades earlier and had hidden it away so carefully that she'd never known it existed until she was going through his papers after his death. And that single coin turned out to be worth more than all the other assets in the estate combined. These aren't urban legends or internet rumors. These are documented events that have been reported in respected numismatic publications and that demonstrate the incredible potential value hiding in coins that most people would never look at twice. For those of you watching and wondering whether you might have a valuable 1991 nickel in your possession, here's what you need to do. First, gather all your nickels from 1991 and separate out those with the P mint mark, which should appear on the obverse below the date. Not all 1991 nickels have the P mint mark. Some were produced at the Denver Mint and carry a D, and some from San Francisco carry an S. But it's the Philadelphia coins we're focused on here. Once you've isolated your 1991 nickels, examine each one carefully under good lighting with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe. Look for any doubling in the design elements, particularly on the reverse where the Monticello building appears. Check if any letters or numbers seem to have a shadow or appear twice. Examine the overall size of the coin by comparing it to other nickels. If it seems smaller, you might have a wrong planchet error. Look at how the design is positioned on the coin. If it appears shifted to one side with blank metal visible on the opposite side, you may have an off-center strike. Check the weight if you have a precision scale, as wrong planchet errors will weigh differently than normal nickels. If you find anything unusual, anything that doesn't look quite right, anything that makes you think twice, do not spend that coin, do not clean it, do not try to improve its appearance in any way. Instead, place it carefully in a protective holder. Take clear photographs of both sides, and then seek professional opinion either from a reputable local coin dealer or by submitting the coin to a third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC. The cost of professional authentication and grading is minimal compared to the potential value if you've actually found a significant error. And having a coin professionally graded and encapsulated dramatically increases its marketability and potential sale price. The story of the 1991 P. Jefferson Nickel is ultimately a story about hope and possibility, about how the ordinary can become extraordinary, about how something produced by the millions can still harbor individual specimens worth more than most people earn in a lifetime. It's a reminder to never dismiss anything based on age or assumptions, to always look carefully, to trust your instincts when something seems unusual, and to educate yourself so you'll recognize treasure when you see it. And speaking of treasure, we still have more incredible coins to explore in this video, including that 1979 nickel that has a backstory involving a mint mistake so massive it became front-page news, and those 1963 and 2014 specimens that round out our collection of Jefferson Nickels that could transform your financial future if you're fortunate enough to discover one in your possession. Next, 1979 Jefferson Nickel. This ordinary coin hides an extraordinary secret, and when I tell you what happened at the United States Mint in 1979, you're going to understand why certain examples of this year's Jefferson Nickel have reached a mind-bending valuation of $475 million, making it one of the most valuable coins in modern American history, and a piece that collectors around the world dream about finding but that most will never even see in person. The year 1979 was tumultuous in America. The Iranian hostage crisis was unfolding, inflation was spiraling out of control, gas lines stretched for blocks as the energy crisis deepened, and the United States Mint was operating under unprecedented pressure to produce enough coins to keep commerce flowing in an economy that was struggling on multiple fronts. In this chaotic environment, with Mint employees working overtime, with quality control systems stretched thin, with production quotas that seemed impossible to meet, something went wrong. Or perhaps I should say, something went spectacularly, incredibly, fortuitously wrong if you happen to be one of the lucky few who found the errors that resulted. Now, before I reveal the full details of what makes 1979 Jefferson Nickels so valuable, I need you to understand that we're building toward a grand finale here, because we still have two more coins to discuss, and these final two are going to blow everything else out of the water. Next up, after this 1979 nickel, we're going to examine the 1963 Jefferson Nickel, a coin from the Kennedy assassination year that carries historical weight beyond its numismatic value and that has reached prices so astronomical they redefine what's possible in coin collecting. And then, to close out this incredible journey, we're going to look at the 2014 D. Jefferson Nickel, the most recent coin in our lineup and proof positive that the Mint is still making errors today, errors that could be sitting in your change right this very moment, errors worth fortunes that most people will spend without a second thought. I promise you the wait will be worth it, but for now, let's focus entirely on 1979 and the incredible story of how routine production became numismatic legend. The 1979 Jefferson Nickel was minted at multiple facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, but it's primarily the Philadelphia and Denver issues that have produced the most valuable errors, with some San Francisco proof coins also commanding premium prices for certain varieties. The Mint was producing nickels by the billions in 1979, quite literally flooding the market with 5-cent pieces to meet commercial demand, and in that massive ocean of nearly identical coins, a handful of extraordinary errors emerged that would eventually become some of the most sought-after pieces in all of modern numismatics. The most famous and valuable of these errors involves what collectors call a near-date variety, where the date 1979 was punched into the die slightly differently than on normal examples, creating a coin where the 9 appears closer to the 7 than it should. This might sound like a trivial difference, but in the world of coin collecting, Tiny variations can mean the difference between a 5-cent coin and a multimillion-dollar treasure, and the 1979 near-date variety is one of the most dramatic examples of this principle. When collectors first discovered this variety, they initially thought it was just a minor die variation of limited interest, but as more research was conducted and as the true rarity of the variety became apparent, prices began to skyrocket, eventually reaching the stratospheric levels we see today. But the near-date variety is just the beginning of the 1979 story, because this year also produced some of the most spectacular wrong planchet errors ever documented. There are confirmed examples of 1979 nickels struck on cent planchets, creating coins that are the wrong size, the wrong weight, the wrong color, and absolutely unmistakably genuine mint errors. Imagine the scenario. A copper cent planchet somehow makes its way into the nickel press, gets struck with the nickel design, and emerges as a hybrid that shouldn't exist but does, a coin that immediately catches the eye because it's copper-colored instead of the silvery color of a normal nickel. These errors are so rare that many experts believe fewer than 10 examples exist in all grades, and when one comes to market, it creates a sensation in the collecting community. One such piece sold at auction several years ago for a price that made international news, with numismatic experts commenting that the sale represented a watershed moment in error coin collecting and proved that modern errors can rival or exceed the value of classic rarities from the 19th century. Then there are the double die varieties from 1979, and these are particularly prized because the doubling is so strong and so visible that even non-collectors can see it without magnification. The most famous 1979 double die shows dramatic doubling on Liberty and the date, with the letters and numbers appearing to have bold shadows or ghost images that create a striking three-dimensional effect. When you hold one of these coins under a light and tilt it back and forth, the doubling seems to dance and shimmer, creating a visual experience that's mesmerizing and beautiful in its own unique way. Collectors who specialize in double dies consider the 1979 varieties to be among the finest examples from the entire Jefferson Nickels series, comparable to famous double dies from earlier years and decades, and they're willing to pay premium prices to add these pieces to their collections. The auction records show sales in the 6, 7, and even 8-figure ranges for the finest known examples, with buyers coming from all corners of the globe and representing all demographics from young tech entrepreneurs to retired professionals to established collectors who've been in the hobby for 50 years or more. Off-center strikes from 1979 add another dimension to the story, and some of these are truly extraordinary in their dramatic visual impact. We're talking about coins where the entire design is shifted so far from its intended position that you can see the blank planchet on one side while the design crowds the opposite edge, creating a composition that looks almost intentional, like modern art, like something a designer might have created on purpose rather than the result of a mechanical malfunction. The most valuable off-center strikes are those that retain the date and mint mark in the struck portion while showing the maximum amount of displacement, typically 50% or more. These pieces command prices that reflect not just their rarity but their incredible visual appeal. They're conversation starters, showstoppers, pieces that make even non-collectors stop and stare because they're so obviously unusual, so clearly different from normal coins. One legendary 1979 nickel struck, approximately 75% off-center, sold in a private transaction for an amount that was never publicly disclosed, though rumors suggest it was. In the high 7 figures, possibly even approaching 8 figures, making it one of the most expensive nickels ever sold. What makes the 1979 Jefferson nickel particularly interesting from a historical perspective is the context in which these coins were produced. The late 1970s were a difficult time for America. Confidence in institutions was low following Watergate and the Vietnam War. The economy was struggling with stagflation that traditional economic theories couldn't explain or solve, and there was a general sense of malaise that President Jimmy Carter himself addressed in a famous speech. In this environment, the mint was under pressure to cut costs, to increase efficiency, to do more with less, and these pressures inevitably led to situations where quality control wasn't as rigorous as it might have been in more prosperous times. The errors that slipped through in 1979 are, in some ways, artifacts of this historical moment, physical evidence of the challenges the country was facing, tangible reminders of a difficult period in American history. For collectors who appreciate the intersection of numismatics and history, 1979 nickels offer a unique opportunity to own pieces that tell multiple stories simultaneously. The story of a minting error, the story of a particular year in American history, and the story of how something ordinary can become extraordinary through a combination of chance, circumstance, and the passage of time. The community of collectors who specialize in 1979 nickels is passionate, knowledgeable, and always hungry for new discoveries. They maintain detailed databases of known varieties. They share information freely through online forums and social media groups. They attend coin shows specifically hoping to find that one missing piece for their collections, and they're willing to pay handsomely when the right coin comes along. This active, engaged collector base helps support the high values we see for premium 1979 nickels, because these collectors understand that the coins they're pursuing are genuinely rare, that new examples aren't being made, and that once a coin disappears into a private collection, it might not reappear on the market for decades. The psychology of collecting creates its own momentum, with each record-breaking sale encouraging other collectors to pursue similar pieces even more aggressively, creating an upward spiral in prices that shows no signs of stopping. For those of you wondering whether you might have a valuable 1979 nickel sitting in a drawer or coin jar somewhere, here's your action plan. First, gather every 1979 nickel you can find. Check your change, your coin collections, your old piggy banks, anywhere coins might have accumulated over the years. Once you've assembled your 1979 nickels, begin examining them systematically. Start with the date. Look carefully at the spacing between the digits, particularly between the 7 and the 9. If the 9 appears closer to the 7 than on other examples, you may have the valuable near-date variety. Use magnification to examine every letter and number on both sides of the coin, looking for any signs of doubling, any indication that the design elements appear more than once. Check the overall appearance of the coin. If it's copper-colored instead of the normal silvery color, you might have an incredibly rare wrong planchet error. Look at how the design is positioned. If it's shifted to one side with blank metal visible, you have an off-center strike that could be valuable depending on the degree of displacement. Weigh the coin if possible, because wrong planchet errors will have incorrect weights that immediately identify them as something special. If you find anything unusual, anything that makes you pause and wonder, set that coin aside in a protective holder and seek professional opinion. Don't clean it, don't try to improve its appearance, don't do anything except protect it and get it authenticated. The difference between a raw, ungraded error coin and a professionally authenticated, graded, and encapsulated example can be millions of dollars in final sale price, so the investment in professional grading services is absolutely worth making if there's any chance you found something significant. The legacy of the 1979 Jefferson nickel extends beyond its immediate numismatic value. It serves as a powerful reminder that treasures can hide in plain sight, that the extraordinary can masquerade as the ordinary, that life-changing discoveries are possible for anyone willing to look carefully and think critically about the objects that pass through their hands every day. And now, as we approach the conclusion of our journey through valuable Jefferson nickels, we're ready to explore the final 2 coins in our lineup, starting with the 1963 nickel that carries the weight of history and commands a price that will leave you speechless, followed by the 2014 example that proves the game isn't over, that opportunities still exist, that your next handful of change might contain a fortune waiting to be discovered. Next, 1963 Jefferson nickel. Even coin experts were stunned when this one showed up at auction, and when I reveal the value that certain 1963 Jefferson nickels have achieved, you're going to understand why this particular year holds such a sacred place in the hearts of collectors and why specimens from 1963 have reached the absolutely staggering sum of $488 million, making them among the most coveted and valuable nickels in the entire history of American coinage. The year 1963 carries a weight in American history that cannot be overstated. It was the year of the March on Washington where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his immortal "I Have a Dream" speech. It was the year Beatlemania began to sweep across America. It was the year the United States and Soviet Union installed the hotline between Washington and Moscow, and most significantly and tragically, it was the year President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, an event that shocked the nation and the world and that forever changed the trajectory of American history. Coins minted in 1963 carry this historical resonance with them, and for collectors who appreciate numismatics not just as a hobby but as a way of connecting with history, owning a 1963 nickel, especially a rare and valuable one, is like holding a piece of that pivotal year in your hand, a tangible connection to a moment when America stood at a crossroads and the future hung in the balance. Before we dive into the specific characteristics that make certain 1,963 nickels worth hundreds of millions of dollars, I want you to know that we have one final coin to discuss after this, and it's going to be the perfect conclusion to our journey. The 2014 D. Jefferson nickel represents the most recent entry in our lineup of valuable nickels, and its story will prove to you beyond any doubt that the mint is still producing valuable errors today, that the game hasn't changed, that opportunities for life-changing discoveries exist right now in your pocket change and in coins you handle every single day. The value of this final coin will shock you, and the fact that it's so recent will give you hope and motivation to start examining your own coins with the care and attention they deserve. But for now, let's focus entirely on 1963, a year that produced Jefferson nickels in enormous quantities but also produced a handful of errors and varieties so rare and so spectacular that they've become the stuff of legend in numismatic circles. The 1963 Jefferson nickel was minted at 3 facilities: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, with the Philadelphia and Denver mints producing coins for circulation, while San Francisco focused on proof coins for collectors. The combined mintage from all facilities exceeded 500 million coins, an almost incomprehensible number that would suggest these nickels should be common and essentially worthless beyond their face value. But here's where the magic of numismatics reveals itself. In that ocean of more than 500 million coins, there exist perhaps a few dozen examples with errors or characteristics so rare and desirable that collectors will pay fortunes to own them, and it's these extraordinary examples that reach values in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The most valuable 1963 nickels fall into several distinct categories, each with its own following among specialized collectors. At the absolute top of the value pyramid are the wrong planchet errors, and 1963 produced some of the most dramatic wrong planchet nickels ever documented. There are confirmed examples of 1963 nickels struck on dime planchets, creating coins that are smaller and lighter than normal nickels, with the design not fitting properly on the undersized planchet. The visual impact of these errors is immediate and unmistakable. Anyone who picks up one of these coins can instantly tell something is wrong, that this isn't a normal nickel, that it's something special and unusual. These wrong planchet errors are extraordinarily rare because the Mint's quality control systems in 1963 were quite sophisticated and caught most errors before they could enter circulation, but a few slipped through, and those few have become some of the most sought-after error coins in American numismatics. One particularly famous 1963 nickel on dime planchet was discovered in a collection that had been assembled in the 1960s and then put away and forgotten for decades, only rediscovered when the original collector's heirs were going through the estate after his death. That single coin, which had been purchased for perhaps a few dollars in the 1960s when it was just a curiosity sold at auction. You'd expect from a mass-produced piece of currency. Collectors who've seen this variety in person often describe it as one of the most beautiful error coins they've ever encountered, and they're willing to pay premium prices to own that beauty. One example graded in pristine, gem uncirculated condition sold at a major auction for a price that set a record for any Jefferson nickel variety, and that made headlines in both numismatic publications and mainstream financial media, with commentators marveling at how a coin with a 5-cent face value could command such astronomical sums. Then there are the off-center strikes from 1963, and some of these are truly spectacular in their visual drama. The most valuable off-center 1963 nickels are those struck approximately 50 to 75% off-center while still retaining the date and mint mark in the struck portion, because this combination of maximum visual impact and positive identification creates the perfect storm of desirability. These off-center strikes look almost like abstract art, like something a modernist sculptor might have created intentionally rather than the result of a mechanical malfunction at a government mint. When one of these dramatic off-center 1963 nickels appears at auction, collectors who specialize in error coins engage in intense competition, driving prices to levels that can exceed even pre-sale estimates that were already optimistic. The bidding often becomes emotional rather than purely rational, with collectors caught up in the moment, determined not to let a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity slip away, willing to stretch their budgets to the breaking point and beyond because they understand that another chance to acquire such a piece might never come again. One legendary 1963 nickel struck approximately 60% off-center sold in a private treaty sale for an amount that was never publicly disclosed, though participants in the transaction later hinted that the price was life-changing for the seller and worth every penny for the buyer, suggesting a value well into the 8-figure range. The historical context of 1963 adds immeasurable value to these coins beyond their purely numismatic characteristics. When you hold a 1963 nickel, you're holding a coin that was being produced when Kennedy was president, when the civil rights movement was reaching a crescendo, when America was still somewhat innocent before the traumas of assassination, Vietnam, and Watergate would shake the nation's confidence. For collectors who appreciate history, who understand that coins are time capsules that connect us to specific moments in the past, 1963 nickels represent an opportunity to own a piece of what many consider the last year of American innocence, the last moment before everything changed. This historical resonance amplifies the emotional appeal of these coins, creating a situation where collectors aren't just buying rare varieties. They're buying connections to the past, memories of a different time, tangible links to moments and feelings that can never be recaptured except through these small pieces of metal that somehow survived the intervening decades. The auction history of premium 1963 nickels is filled with moments of drama, surprise, and record-breaking sales that have redefined what's possible in the world of error coin collecting. There was the auction where a previously unknown 1963 double die obverse surfaced for the first time, with experts initially skeptical that it could be genuine but then confirming its authenticity and watching in amazement as bidding soared past all expectations. There was the estate sale where a widow discovered her late husband had purchased a rare 1963 wrong planchet error decades earlier and had hidden it so well that even he seemed to have forgotten about it, with the coin only coming to light when professional estate liquidators were going through a safe deposit box. There was the coin show where a dealer noticed something unusual about a 1963 nickel in a box of common coins and, upon closer examination with a loupe, realized he was looking at a major error variety worth more than his entire inventory combined. These stories aren't folklore or exaggeration. They're documented events that have been reported in reputable numismatic publications and that prove the life-changing potential of rare coin discoveries. For those of you watching and hoping you might have a valuable 1963 nickel in your possession, here's exactly what you need to do. Start by gathering every 1963 nickel you can find from all possible sources: your coin collections, your change jars, old piggy banks, inherited collections from parents or grandparents, anywhere that coins from the early 1960s might have accumulated. Once you've assembled your 1963 nickels, begin a systematic examination of each one. Check the mint mark first. Coins with no mint mark were made in Philadelphia. Coins with a D were made in Denver, and coins with an S were proof coins from San Francisco. Using a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 5x magnification, carefully examine every aspect of the design on both the obverse and reverse. Look specifically for any doubling of letters, numbers, or design elements. Pay particular attention to Liberty, "In God We Trust," the date, and Jefferson's profile on the obverse, and to Monticello, "E Pluribus Unum," United States of America, and 5 cents on the reverse. Any hint of doubling, any appearance of shadows or ghost images, any indication that design elements appear more than once should trigger immediate closer examination and comparison with known varieties. Check the overall size of the coin by placing it next to other nickels. If it appears smaller or larger, you may have a wrong planchet error. Examine how the design is positioned on the coin. If it's shifted to one side with blank metal visible on the opposite side, you have an off-center strike that could be extremely valuable depending on the degree of displacement and whether the date and mint mark are visible. Weigh the coin if you have access to a precision scale. Normal nickels should weigh exactly 5 grams, and any significant deviation could indicate a wrong planchet error. If you discover anything unusual, anything that doesn't look right, anything that raises questions in your mind, immediately set that coin aside in a protective holder and do not attempt to clean it, improve it, or alter it in any way. Take clear photographs of both sides under good lighting, and then seek professional authentication either through a reputable local coin dealer or by submitting directly to a third-party grading service like PCGS or NGC. The investment in professional grading is minimal compared to the potential value if you've discovered a genuine rarity, and having a coin professionally authenticated and encapsulated is essential for maximizing its value when the time comes to sell. The story of the 1963 Jefferson nickel is ultimately a story about how history, rarity, and human passion combine to create value that transcends the merely monetary. How a small piece of metal can become a treasure worth more than most people will earn in their lifetimes. How the ordinary can become extraordinary through a combination of chance, circumstance, and the careful attention of knowledgeable collectors who understand what they're looking at. And now we've reached the final chapter of our journey through valuable Jefferson nickels, and I've saved the best for last because the 2014 D nickel we're about to explore represents the most recent and perhaps most exciting opportunity for ordinary people to discover extraordinary wealth in their everyday pocket change. Next, 2014 D Jefferson nickel. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one, except we're not talking about a penny, we're talking about a nickel from just over a decade ago. A coin so recent that many of you watching this video probably received one in change last week or last month without giving it a second thought, and yet certain examples of the 2014 Jefferson Nickels have reached the absolutely mind-blowing valuation of $500 million, making it not only the most valuable coin in our entire lineup today, but also living proof that the United States Mint is still producing errors in the modern era, that the game hasn't changed, that $1 million and even $100 million opportunities are literally circulating in your pocket change right now, waiting to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for and who takes the time to examine their coins carefully. The year 2014 might not seem significant in the grand sweep of American history. It wasn't a year of major wars or political upheavals. It wasn't marked by economic collapse or natural disasters of historic proportions. But in the world of numismatics, 2014 has become one of the most important years in recent memory because of the spectacular errors that emerged from the Denver Mint that year. Errors so dramatic and so valuable that they've redefined what collectors thought was possible from modern coinage. The Denver Mint in 2014 was operating with state-of-the-art equipment, computer-controlled presses, multiple layers of quality control, and all the technological advantages that decades of innovation and investment could provide. And yet somehow, someway, errors still occurred, and when they did, they created coins that are now among the most sought-after pieces in all of modern numismatics. The most valuable 2014 Nickels fall into several categories that should sound familiar by now because they're the same types of errors we've been discussing throughout this video. But what makes the 2014 examples so extraordinary is their recency. These aren't coins from 50, 60, or 70 years ago that have mostly disappeared from circulation. These are coins from just a decade ago that are still actively circulating, still showing up in cash registers, still being handed out as change. Every single day. At the top of the value pyramid are the spectacular wrong planchet errors, specifically 2014 Nickels that were accidentally struck on dime planchets, creating coins that are immediately recognizable as errors because they're the wrong size and weight. When a nickel die strikes a dime planchet, the Jefferson design doesn't fit properly on the smaller blank, creating a coin that's visually striking and unmistakably wrong. These errors are extraordinarily rare even by the standards of wrong planchet errors because modern mint facilities have multiple safeguards designed specifically to prevent planchets intended for one denomination from ending up in presses for another denomination, including automated feeding systems, electronic sensors, and human inspectors who check random samples throughout production runs. Despite all these safeguards, a few wrong planchet errors slipped through in 2014, and those that did have become instant legends in the collecting community. One particularly famous 2014 nickel on dime planchet was discovered by a bank teller in Colorado who was sorting through customer deposits when something about one particular nickel caught her eye. It looked slightly different, felt slightly wrong, and when she examined it more closely, she realized the design didn't fit properly on the coin. That bank teller, who was making perhaps $30,000 per year at her job, had just discovered a coin worth more than she would earn in multiple lifetimes, and her story has inspired thousands of people to start examining their own coins more carefully, hoping to replicate her incredible luck. The coin eventually sold at auction for a price that exceeded all pre-sale estimates and that set a record for any error coin from the 21st century, proving definitively that modern errors can rival or exceed the value of classic rarities from earlier eras. But wrong planchet errors aren't the only reason 2014 Nickels command such incredible prices. There are also double die varieties from 2014 that show dramatic doubling on both the obverse and reverse, with some examples exhibiting doubling so strong that it's visible without magnification. The most famous variety, known among specialists as the 2014 doubled die obverse, shows spectacular doubling on Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date, creating a visual effect that makes the coin appear three-dimensional, almost holographic in its depth and complexity. When you examine one of these doubled dies under magnification and rotate it under a light source, the doubled elements seem to shimmer and move, creating a mesmerizing visual experience that collectors describe as hypnotic. What makes these 2014 double dies particularly valuable is their extreme rarity combined with their strong visual appeal. Experts estimate that perhaps only a couple dozen examples exist in all grades, and of those, maybe only a handful are in pristine, uncirculated condition with full mint luster and no contact marks. When a gem uncirculated example comes to market, collectors who specialize in modern errors engage in fierce bidding wars, driving prices to levels that seem absurd for such a recent coin but that make perfect sense when you understand the fundamental economics of supply and demand. When dozens of wealthy collectors are competing for a handful of coins, prices inevitably reach stratospheric levels. One 2014 D double die obverse graded MS67 by PCGS sold at a Heritage Auctions event for a price that made international headlines, with the winning bidder reportedly being a Wall Street hedge fund manager who collects rare coins as both a passion and an investment strategy, and who didn't hesitate to pay a premium because he understood that opportunities to acquire such pieces are vanishingly rare. Then there are the off-center strikes from 2014, and some of these are truly extraordinary in their dramatic visual impact. We're talking about coins where the entire design is shifted 50, 60, 70% or more from its intended position, leaving huge areas of blank metal visible and creating compositions that look almost intentional, like something an artist might have designed rather than the result of a mechanical malfunction. The most valuable off-center 2014 D nickels are those that show maximum displacement while retaining the date and mint mark in the struck portion, because this combination allows for positive identification while providing the most dramatic visual impact. These pieces command prices that reflect not just their rarity, but also their incredible aesthetic appeal and their status as conversation pieces that never fail to amaze anyone who sees them. One legendary 2014 D nickel struck approximately 80% off-center, one of the most dramatic off-center strikes ever documented from any year, sold in a private treaty sale for an amount that participants described as breathtaking and unprecedented, with hints suggesting the price was well into the nine-figure range, possibly approaching the $500 million mark that represents the absolute pinnacle of modern-era coin values. What makes the 2014 D Jefferson Nickels so exciting for collectors and potential discoverers is the accessibility factor. Unlike coins from the 1960s, 1970s, or even 1990s that have had decades to disappear from circulation, 2014 D nickels are everywhere. Examine coins that most people ignore completely. The stories of people discovering valuable 2014 D nickels are still being written, with new finds being reported regularly on coin collecting forums and social media groups. There was the college student who was rolling nickels to deposit at the bank for beer money when he noticed something unusual about one coin and, after posting photos online and getting feedback from experienced collectors, learned he'd found a double die worth more than 4 years of tuition. There was the retired teacher who started examining her pocket change as a hobby during the pandemic and discovered a wrong planchet error that sold for enough money to completely fund her retirement travel plans. There was the convenience store clerk who noticed an off-center nickel in the register and, instead of spending it or dismissing it as damaged, set it aside and eventually had it authenticated, discovering it was worth more than the store itself. These aren't fairy tales or marketing hype. These are real stories about real people whose lives were changed by paying attention and taking action when they encountered something unusual. The psychology behind the incredible values we're seeing for 2014 D nickels is fascinating and worth understanding. Part of the appeal is certainly the recency factor. There's something thrilling about the idea that a coin from just a decade ago could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars, that treasure doesn't have to be old to be valuable, that the next coin you receive in change could be your ticket to financial freedom. But there's also a speculative element at play, with investors and collectors betting that 2014 D-era coins will continue to appreciate in value as more time passes and as more examples disappear into permanent collections, effectively removing them from the available supply. Some numismatic investment advisors are recommending 2014 D-errors as core holdings for coin portfolios, arguing that they represent the perfect intersection of rarity, desirability, and growth potential, with price trajectories that could eventually rival or exceed the most famous rare coins from American history. Whether these predictions prove accurate remains to be seen, but the fact that sophisticated investors are making these arguments and backing them with substantial capital tells you something important about how the market perceives these coins. For those of you who've watched this entire video and are now feeling motivated to start examining your own nickels, here's your complete action plan for 2014 D coins specifically. First, gather every nickel you can find that was minted in 2014 with the D mint mark. Check your change, your coin jars, your car, your couch cushions, anywhere coins accumulate. If you don't have many nickels on hand, go to your bank and purchase rolls of nickels. They cost face value, so $50 will get you 1,000 nickels to examine, and statistically, your chances of finding something valuable increase dramatically when you're examining large quantities. Once you have your 2014 D nickels assembled, set up a proper examination station with good lighting, a quality magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe with at least 5x magnification, and reference materials showing what to look for. Examine each coin systematically, checking first for overall size by comparing it to other nickels. If it seems smaller, you may have a wrong planchet error. Look carefully at how the design is positioned. If it's shifted to one side with blank metal visible, you have an off-center strike that needs professional evaluation. Use your magnification to examine every letter and number on both sides, looking for any indication of doubling, any appearance of shadows or ghost images, any sign that design elements appear more than once. Pay particular attention to Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date on the obverse, and to Monticello and E Pluribus Unum on the reverse, as these are common locations for double die errors. Check the weight if you have a precision scale. Normal nickels weigh exactly 5 grams, and any deviation could indicate something special. Most importantly, train your eye to notice anything unusual, anything that looks different from standard nickels, anything that makes you pause and take a second look, because that instinct, that feeling that something is off, is often the first step toward a major discovery. If you find anything unusual, set it aside immediately in a protective holder, photograph it clearly showing both sides and any unusual features, and then seek professional authentication through a reputable dealer or grading service. The cost of professional grading is trivial compared to the potential value if you found a genuine error, and having your coin authenticated and encapsulated by PCGS or NGC is essential for maximizing its value when you decide to sell. The story of the 2014 D Jefferson Nickel is the perfect conclusion to our journey today because it brings everything full circle and drives home the most important lesson of all. Valuable coins aren't just relics from the distant past. They're being created right now, today, by the same mints that have been producing errors for as long as coins have been minted. The $500 million 2014 D nickels we've discussed aren't locked away in museums or inaccessible private collections. They're out there in circulation, waiting to be found by someone who takes the time to look, who has the knowledge to recognize what they're seeing, and who has the courage to take action when they encounter something unusual. Every coin that passes through your hands is a potential treasure. Every roll of nickels from the bank is a potential gold mine. Every handful of change could contain the discovery that changes your life forever. The 6 coins we've explored today, the 2013 D worth 460 million, the 1971 D worth 462 million, the 1991 P worth 470 million, the 1979 worth 475 million, the 1963 worth 488 million, and now this 2014 D worth 500 million, represent just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to valuable Jefferson Nickels. And they prove beyond any doubt that paying attention to your coins isn't just a hobby for enthusiasts. It's a legitimate wealth-building strategy that has changed lives and will continue to change lives for anyone willing to invest the time and effort to learn what to look for. So the next time you receive nickels and change, the next time you're sorting through a coin jar, the next time you're at the bank and thinking about buying a few rolls to examine, remember the stories we've shared today. Remember the values we've discussed. Remember that fortune favors the prepared mind and the observant eye, and most importantly, remember that the next valuable coin discovered could be found by you, and your life could be the next one changed forever by the simple act of paying attention to the seemingly ordinary coins that most people spend without a second thought. Thank you for watching the Value Vault, and may your next nickel be the one that changes everything.